So I want to as I say, it's slightly left field, but I think you'll see how it fits together. Fivefold mission. There's 2 books over there. By the way, those books are to look at, not take away afterwards. Please. Yeah. There's Neil Cole's book on the Fivefold with an appalling title, really. Primal Fire. I don't know why. And anyway, it's a really helpful book. And then there's Alan Hirsch's latest book, 5Q. You may have read an earlier book on the Fivefold called The Permanent Revolution. And there's also stuff about it in that other book that I mentioned earlier that I can't remember. But Fivefold ministry is kind of crushed and misunderstood by Christendom. But I think if we're going to develop disciple-making communities, we ignore the Fivefold at our peril. I'm not going to read the passage, but I am going to be referring to it. So if you've got a Bible or your mobile device, Ephesians chapter 3 from verse 20 to chapter 4 verse 16. And I want you to notice the bookends, if you like, that sometimes we miss because of the chapter division. So the bookends of 3 verses 20 and 21 and 4 verse 16. Now glory to God who is able through his mighty power work within us, that's corporate, to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think. Glory to him in the church and in Christ Jesus through all generations forever and ever. Amen. Then you get the bit in the middle and he concludes with, he makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. It helps the other parts grow, so the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. And it seems to me the implication is this, that if we take seriously the bit in the middle, the consequence is the bookends. A church that really works, a church where God is able to do more than we might ask or imagine. And if you look at that passage as a whole, then the first bit, verses 1 to 7, are about unity. And then there is a shift in verse 7 to diversity, where Paul changes it from all these things that are one, that we've got in common, through to however he has given each one of us a special gift. And if you remove Paul's digression in verses 8 to 10, and if you allow verse 7 to flow into verse 11, now the digression is important, and Alan Hirsch's 5Q book makes a lot of that. But if you just remove that, let's look at 2 different versions. So if we just take the digression out and just read 7 through to 11, it says this, however, he has given each one of us a special gift through the generosity of Christ. These are the gifts Christ gave to the church, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers. Another translation puts it, each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be pastors and teachers. And certainly, if you look at the life-shaped stuff, as in A Passionate Life and through 3DM and things like that, if you read Hirsch and if you read Cole, the assumption is this, that these are for everyone. So everyone in the church is one of these 5. We've tended to take it as this is about leaders. But the more recent thinking is that if you take the digression out, the natural reading of what Paul writes is that this is about everybody in the church. Which takes us on to the difference between spiritual gifts and the fivefold. I would suggest to you, and I think this comes out of their writings, that the fivefold are almost like personality types. We're not talking about clones, because we're each of us individual, but they're almost like personality types. Just stick with me if you struggling with that. They're not the same as spiritual gifts. Spiritual gifts are associated with some of the ministries. I mean, prophets probably have the prophetic gift. But the spiritual gifts are more like tools to get the job done. I would make a distinction between the fivefold and those. And the consequence of this is that God has wired each one of us in a certain way. As we go through it, you will discover that you're mainly one, but there are other bits of the others in you as well. But what it's about is God has wired you a certain way. There are certain things about the kingdom of God that fire and impassion you. There are certain things about the kingdom of God that get you out of bed in the morning. The thing that always got me out of bed in the morning is the whole disciple missional agenda. And this was brought home forcibly to me when one year in Durham I was going to have a student minister for a month from Spurgeon's. And he kept asking me a question, and I couldn't understand why he asked me this question. He kept asking me, will I be able to visit people? Will I be able to visit people? Why did he ask me that question? Because he's a pastor. I'm not a pastor. If you'd said to me as a church leader, you never have to visit anybody again, I would have said, yeah, hallelujah. Because I'm elsewhere on this. And actually, when I discovered that, I said, what a freedom. I didn't feel guilty anymore. And after that point, I found it really difficult when people said, this is our pastor, Chris. No, I'm not. But anyway, we'll come on to that. I've gone off it. Life shapes, again, they distinguish, I think, quite helpfully between our base ministry, which is our main one, and they make the point that from time to time, God puts us in a place where we have a phase ministry, where we operate primarily out of one of the others, which is uncomfortable for us, but it's a place of growth. And there are times when we have to, if we are mainly, let's say, prophetic, there are times when God might put us in a place where we have to be a pastor. And it's a place of growth. Now, if you're mainly prophetic and you spend all your life trying to be a pastor, it'll kill you. But from time to time, God will put you in that place because it's a place of growth. And the reality is the fivefold have always been present in the church. If you read church history, you see them popping out. It's just within Christendom, really pastor and teacher were predominant. Evangelists were occasional ministries. Apostles and prophets were a pain in the backside. But they were still there. Don? We sent them abroad, or they started parachurch organisations. That's the way it tended to function. But, and we'll see as we go on. So I'm going to do a real whistle-stop tour. And I'm sorry again, bit of grandmother sucking eggs. But if we start with the apostle, you know where it comes from. It's this sense of one who is sent out. So apostles are those who break new ground for the gospel. They establish new work. They open up new territories. They're the entrepreneurs of the church. Actually, not only did we send them overseas, many of the great monastic movements. You got sent overseas, didn't you? Hey? And now you're back. Bang on time. Many of the great monastic movements, the reforming movements, were started by apostolic figures, as you look back in church history. Visionary and pioneering. I love this quote. Apostles see open doors, whereas others see brick walls. They are not authoritarian figures. There is no hierarchy in the fivefold. There is plurality. Now, apostles are often listed first in the New Testament because they're first on the ground in a new situation. That's why they're first. First apostles, second prophets. We'll build on that in a moment. And they're first, not because they're in charge, just they were there first. And we need to start reading the New Testament, don't we, through missional glasses, not through Christendom glasses. Now, interestingly, in Jesus is the sent one. He's an apostle, clearly identified as that. Interestingly, in Jesus, you get all five, don't you? Jesus is an apostle, he's a prophet, an evangelist, he's a pastor, he's a teacher. So therefore, If the body of Christ is going to be complete, we need all five. If we are to be the body of Christ, I've got to get back to Telford. If my car, I don't have 5 cylinders, but if my car was a 5-cylinder car and only 2 were operating, I'm in trouble. So often as the church, we've operated just with 2. Now, if you're a pastor or a teacher, please, I'm not devaluing you. And sometimes in this setting, it sounds like, oh, he's having a go at pastors and teachers. No, I'm not. But we need the fivefold. And if we're going to have the fivefold, we need the pastors and we need the teachers as well. The obvious biblical example is Paul. And at the end of Romans, I think he says something really significant about what it is for him to be an apostle. It's always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that I would not be building on someone else's foundation. And I think that's quite a significant definition of what it is to be apostle. Some of us are old enough, don't you? Some of us are old enough, aren't we, to remember apostles in the United Kingdom in the 70s and 80s. They were authoritarian figures, and they took over established churches. I think they failed. I'm not being critical. It's great with hindsight, isn't it? But I think under Paul's model they failed, because actually apostles lead things that they started. And they do a bit more than that, as we shall see. So, if you're an apostle, these are the things you will enjoy. Dreaming dreams, making them happen, strategizing, causing breakthroughs. You'll like change. The kind of words that describe an apostle: they imagine, they initiate, they excite, they envision, they challenge, they stretch, they pioneer. Alan Hirsch, and I would agree with him, he suggests actually that the fivefold find their origin in the character of God, and therefore you see them throughout humanity. And so actually you see apostles in everyday life, entrepreneurs, explorers, innovative. Richard Branson is an apostolic figure. There's another key, I don't know whether that was an astonished silence or not, anyway, or whether you just nodded off. Anyway, the other thing about apostles is that they carry in them the DNA of the gospel. What they're able to do is they are able to take the DNA of the gospel and they are able to plant it in a new situation. And I think that's really important in what happens next. Because what we tend to do is we tend to plant clones. We tend to plant churches that are quite similar to mother churches. Whereas actually what an apostle does is they discover, what will the gospel look like in this soil, in this community? And actually you see the Apostle Paul doing that, in that the churches he planted were very different. And the way he went about mission and evangelism in different places was very different. But so often in his letters, in the letters to the Philippians, he uses Philippian images, doesn't he? He quotes pagan poets because he's immersed in the culture of the day. So, but then what you see in the Apostle Paul is he fiercely guards the DNA of the gospel as it faces this danger of being distorted and spoiled. And so he writes to the Corinthians, doesn't he? Because of God's grace to me, I've laid the foundation like an expert builder. Be careful what you build on it. And the third thing that the apostle does is they create an environment within which other ministries emerge. And in a pioneering situation, that will be through the new believers. It's what Paul had to do. And actually, if we're going to be a disciple-making movement, that's one of the things we will do. It was my pleasure, you see, because apostles they embed the ability to multiply. And one of the great joys in Durham was to work with Jorge Damasceno, Brazilian, missionary. He was about 19 or 20 when he went to Albania when the wall first came down. And he planted 3 Baptist churches in Albania, and he enabled the Baptist Union to come. You probably won't find him in the history books because he's just that kind of quiet bloke. But George, he has this extraordinary apostolic church planting anointing on him. And so to watch him, because he came in, we arrived in Durham, and then he came in about 3 or 4 months later. And suddenly there was this Saturday night Portuguese speaking congregation, because it's just what he does. He kind of gathers. But it was fascinating to watch him develop the congregation and do this thing where he created an environment where the other ministries emerged. And so he had people in the band, coming back to your point, he had people in the worship group who couldn't sing and couldn't play an instrument. But it didn't matter. I mean, the ones who couldn't sing, their microphone was never turned on. They never knew that. There was a guy who played the keyboard like this. But by the time we left, 10 years later, he was leading worship from it. Because he had this ability to see the other ministries emerge. And he's now, we never really understood actually, no, I won't say that, I'm going off on one there. But he's now actually in Great Yarmouth leading one of the churches that he planted. And they're just a remarkable character. And we need to see that. Those gifts released among us. One of the things Neil Cole does in his book, I think really in Primal Fire really helpfully, is he talks about the potential weaknesses of apostles. See, one of the weaknesses of apostles, and you see this in church history, is the tendency to go alone. You see, if you're an apostle, actually you also have the other four in you as well. You have to have that. And you see them in Paul. Paul's a teacher, he's prophetic, he's certainly an evangelist, he's also pastoral. You know, the letter to the Thessalonians, he pours out his pastoral heart. The very reason he bothers to write is because he's got this pastoral heart for people, the great lists of people at the end of his letters. But there is a danger that apostles go it alone. They become control freaks. They can move on too quickly before the thing's established. They can be impatient. Paul and Barnabas fall out over Mark. And then we get prophets. You'll know the difference between Old Testament and New Testament prophets. All Christians by nature are equipped to hear the voice of God, but some have this prophetic anointing on them. And so Jesus is a prophet. Sorry, just going back. I think one of the things about prophets is they bring spiritual intelligence to a situation, don't they? They see beyond the rational. There is also this other stream of prophetic that you see a continuity and a discontinuity between Old and New Testament of this passion for truth and justice. And again, we see that in Jesus. And so prophets, if you're a prophet, you will enjoy being alone with God. You'll love waiting on God, listening to God. Kind of words that describe you, waiting, retreating, seeking God's heart, hear from God. There is also an element of challenging and confronting. You see them in everyday life. Visionaries, futurists, people who speak out of their perceptions. Often creative people speak prophetically, don't they? You know, through the arts. Speak prophetically into culture. But there are weaknesses, aren't there? Can be a lonely business being a prophet, and particularly in Christendom. Being a prophet was a very difficult place to be. There is the danger of working in isolation. We've all known hit and run prophets, haven't we? Yeah? A kind of immaturity. But to be fair to prophets often get overwhelmed with the hopelessness of the situation. Because they kind of see it from God's perspective and they see what's wrong. And pastorally, we need to help them through that period, because often it is just overwhelming. Immature prophets don't understand that what is revealed to them doesn't necessarily need to be shared. Sometimes it needs to be held and nurtured. Actually, hearing from God's the easy bit. It's what you do with it and how you handle it is the really difficult thing. Immature prophets can lack action and application. No, they just love being in God's presence, but nothing ever happens as a result of that. And the fascinating thing is this, that immature prophets react badly to methods and strategies because they're unspiritual or perceived to be. And that brings them into conflict with the apostles, which is really interesting because apostles and prophets, it seems to me, if you read the New Testament missionally, apostles and prophets are the ones who work together to break new ground. And so Paul writes, doesn't he, in Ephesians 3:20 and 1 Corinthians 12:28, God has placed in the church first of all apostles, second prophets. And these are the people that God has given to the church to lay new foundations, apostles and prophets working together. You see that when Paul and Barnabas are set apart. Now, in Acts 13, the way that's written suggests that it talks about prophets and teachers. And first is Barnabas, and the way the Greek's written, I understand, I'm not a Greek scholar, is that it suggests that the first ones are prophets and the second ones are teachers. Now later, of course, Paul gets identified as an apostle, but Barnabas, it looks like, was a prophet. Paul clearly becomes, that's embryonic in him, that the apostle. Later, when they fall out, Paul chooses Silas, who is clearly identified as a prophet. Acts 15:32. And you see this pattern in church history as well. So 18th century revival figures, key figures, John and Charles Wesley, George Whitefield. When you look at it through the eyes of the Fivefold, the Wesleys were an apostle and a prophet, and Whitefield was an evangelist. And sadly they fell out, didn't they, over a doctrinal dispute. We don't do that these days, so that's all right. And they went their separate ways. And history would tell us, actually, that Whitefield was the greater evangelist. He has the greater impact evangelistically. There were real heartfelt commitments, but very little long-term fruit. And towards the end of his life, his comment about this, wasn't he? He said Wesley had a sheepfold. Wesley had a sheepfold. Because you see, John Wesley was an apostle. Charles was a prophet. You see that in his hymns. Charles is clearly a man who loves the presence of God. They're real revival hymns, aren't they? So Charles is the prophet and John is the apostle. He was able to embed the DNA of the gospel in his culture, and he developed a method, hence Methodism. Which was a barbed comment, wasn't it? But he developed a method for making disciples, and he would not go and preach somewhere evangelistically unless the bands and the classes were in place already, because he knew the significance of discipleship. What Wesley developed was a disciple-making movement. And I've done a lot of work with the Telford Methodist Circuit, and I pull their leg. They're getting a bit fed up with me, because I keep saying to them, you're the ones who should be leading the way in this disciple-making thing, because it's in your DNA, isn't it? Where did you go wrong? And I think, never found this written down, I don't know whether you would know this, Dave, but I think you can measure the decline of Methodism when they stopped doing the bands and the classes, when they went to primarily a Sunday event, I think. But I've never found that written down. William and Catherine Booth, Salvation Army. Generally reckoned he was the apostle, she was the prophet. I bet that was an interesting marriage. Because opposites do attract, don't they? They're not easy bedfellows. To generalise, the apostle is concerned with the wine skin, and the prophet's concerned with the wine, the new wine. But actually you need both. You need both. And they tend to separate if you're not careful. The apostle tends to call us to action, the prophet tends to call us to prayer. Now, when I was in Dereham towards the last few years, we did quite a lot of stuff around the Fivefold, as you might be able to tell. And it was really helpful. I had a fantastic leadership team. I had a leadership team to die for, and I really mean that. They were great. But occasionally in the eldership meetings, there was some tension. And this was like, because what we had in the room was we had apostolic type people and we had prophetic type people. And so when an issue arose, the prophets said, well, we need to pray about this. And the apostles were going, why do we need to pray? We know what to do. And when we'd done this together, we realised, oh, that's why there's a bit of a tension in the room sometime. And it became a bit of a joke, Issue comes up, somebody says something, and one of the prophets would say, well, you'd expect an apostolic type person to say that, wouldn't you? Actually, we need to pray. And actually understanding these just helps in that whole tension thing. Neil Cole describes the apostle and prophet as the start and go team, and the evangelist, the pastor and the teacher as the stay and grow team. So he suggests that The apostles and the prophets get something going, but then you need the evangelists and the pastors and the teachers to really build on that. And it's interesting that we would think the evangelist naturally would be part of the initial, but he would say to us, evangelists don't do that embedding of the DNA, but actually they're part of keeping evangelism at the heart of what is planted and established. You're very familiar with evangelists, the bearer of good news. Evangelists love being with non-Christians, don't they? They love finding ways of sharing the good news. We're all called to be witnesses. We're not all called to be evangelists. But the other great thing about evangelists is they provoke the church to do evangelism. They're like the conscience of the church. Sometimes they're a pain in the neck. Sorry if you're an evangelist, because you keep on about evangelism. But the church needs that. And by their example and actions, they release others into effective evangelism. Jesus was clearly an evangelist, the woman at the well. Classic example in Acts is Philip. In Acts 21 verse 8, he's actually called Philip the evangelist. But his wife gave birth to 4 daughters who were prophets. Again, I bet that was an interesting kind of tea time discussion, wasn't it? 4 prophetic daughters. And so evangelists love building relationships beyond the church. They love people. They love discussion, sharing their point of view. They love leading people to Christ, and they love encouraging others to witness. If you're an evangelist, you'll be an enthusiast. You're a people gatherer. You're persuasive. You're a sower. You're a reaper. Lots of us are sowers. The evangelists are the reapers. In everyday life, you see them as salespeople, enthusiastic storyteller journalists, some politicians, not all politicians, but some politicians are evangelists, aren't they? You know, again, some of us are older than us to remember. I mean, it didn't go so well in the end, but Tony Blair was an evangelist, wasn't he? You know, things can only get better and all that stuff. Sadly, they didn't, but that's another story. Weaknesses. Evangelists are not always exclusive, but they're often extroverts. So they love being with people. That's where they get their energy from. But evangelists need to be challenged to work on their relationship with God and their personal walk with him. They can get frustrated with the church, and sometimes it's perceived inward focus. So again, we need to be aware of that and help them work through that. They can also get obsessed with a method. Just because it works for them doesn't mean it'll work for other people. We've got in one of the Pentecostal, in the Elim Church in Telford, we've a fantastic evangelist, Belle. She's got a really great, she uses it on the streets. She's got a little bracelet of different coloured beads, and through it, she wears it on her arm. Evangelists are winsome, aren't they? They're just able to engage. And she tells the story from creation through fall, through these different coloured beads. And I was fascinated by this. And she said to me, I've got a bag of them. Here you go, you can use them. And I, took it away. And then I got back and I thought, that's a waste of time. I can't use your method. Because actually this is about who you are, Belle. And sometimes evangelists get kind of caught with their method. And we need to be aware of that. Evangelists can start churches and new things, but remember Whitfield and Wesley. And so if you're an evangelist and you're leading a church, that's great. But you need to be aware that you need the other 4 around you. Because if on your own, as an evangelist, you do it, what you will tend to find is you will have a steady stream of conversions. And you will bless every other church in your neighbourhood. And you see that sometimes. And again, I'm not being hard on evangelists. Boy, we need you. Pastors. We've kind of used this as a bit of a catch-all, haven't we? Interesting, this is the only place in the New Testament where the word pastor is used. Now, that's slightly dodgy, because actually the other words around it are used a lot. But actually, and it's interesting how we've invested actually almost the fivefold in calling somebody a pastor. Pastor shepherds people, cares for them, tender heart. They'll pay the price for others. Mature pastors will confront as well as encourage. This is being recorded, so I better be a bit careful. I'm an accredited Baptist minister. I'm a member of a Baptist church, but I never go there because I preach elsewhere every Sunday morning. So on our estate, there is a pioneering Anglican church plant meets in a school that Lynn and I go to. Their vicar is a brilliant bloke, but actually primarily he's a pastor. And one of the things I notice in Lee is, as a good pastor, he confronts. Where there are issues that need tackling, he doesn't shy away from. I do. He doesn't. Really interesting. And he handles it really well. But he won't let people get away with inappropriate behaviour. And he tackles it beautifully. And that's one of the things that pastors do well. Contrary to my preaching in the past, shepherds don't feed the sheep. When did you ever see a shepherd pulling up grass and shoving it down a sheep's throat? Whoa, you say to me. Jesus said in John 21 to Peter, feed my sheep. Actually, a fuller understanding of that word is a much broader understanding. It means take care of my sheep. Shepherds feed weak and small lambs and injured sheep. But generally, they take sheep to good pasture and let them get on with it. And again, we're having a conversation over coffee about part of the whole disciple-making agenda is actually teaching people to feed themselves and helping people to mature and grow in their relationship with God. But we'll come on to that later. Jesus, of course, is the good shepherd. Barnabas, again, it's interesting because the word pastor is only used. There's nobody identified as pastor. And Barnabas was obviously prophetic, but there was something pastoral about Barnabas, wasn't there? And you also see that in the way that he wants to bring Mark back into the fold when the hard-hearted Apostle Paul, well, he's failed once, let's leave him behind. So pastors love people. They love seeing people grow. They love the one-to-one chats. They love hospitality, speaking the truth in love. They love listening. So if you're a pastor, you'll be caring, sensitive, loving, confronting, supporting, and you see them, don't you, in lots of different aspects of life. Immature shepherds tend to be overly protective of people. They're quite immature shepherds are quite suspicious of apostles, prophets, and evangelists because they tend to rock the boat. But the problem is, what happens when God rocks your boat? And Peter Domine from Church from Scratch in Southend, he said to me, we're having a conversation once, and he said to me, have you noticed the difference between discipleship and pastoral care? Go on then. He said, often in pastoral care, when disaster strikes somebody's life, we want to get the bits back together again as soon as possible. Whereas actually, in a disciple-making relationship, maybe we need to look at the bits a bit before we see them put back together. See what I'm saying? There's an opportunity to grow. You know, what is God saying through this? What's God doing? I went through a period in Dereham where I just said to my heart, when you meet with the cell group leaders, because there were cell groups, interesting in Dereham, they were cell groups by name. They were really Bible study groups. But I said to my heart, when you meet with the cell group leaders, just don't use the M word again. Multiplication. Because many of them were led by pastors who were very protective of their group. So actually, sometimes pastors leading small groups, you need pastors in small groups, but sometimes when they lead them, if you're trying to be missional, isn't always very helpful. But you cannot have too many pastors in a church. Because they're the glue that holds things together. Teachers, you know what a teacher is. But the teachers love the Word of God, don't they? And they have the ability to communicate that love. They guard the truth, they defend it. Again, teaching, we often think about this kind of thing, but teaching is more than just somebody holding forth, isn't it? We need teachers in our small groups, but I suggest to you, it's probably not a good idea having teachers leading them. Because I'm a teacher and I can get obsessed with minutiae. You need a teacher in the small group to occasionally just bring us back to what the passage actually means. But I suggest to you if they're leading it. The best definition I ever heard of, this came from a New Frontiers leader, best definition of a small group leader is the 20-minute pub test. Would I want to spend 20 minutes in the pub with this person? And if the answer is no, then don't let them lead a small group. You need the other fivefold in the small group. But actually, in terms of leader, you need a people gatherer. You need somebody. You can dispute that with me afterwards. Jesus, obviously, teacher, rabbi. Apollos. It's a great one there, isn't it? He was a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the scriptures. He'd been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervency, great fervour, and taught about Jesus accurately. He vigorously refuted the Jews in public debate, proving from the scriptures that Jesus was the Christ. There's a number of different features of the teacher in that description. And so teachers enjoy reading and studying the Bible, there's a surprise, but also helping others understand the truth. If you're a teacher, those are the kind of words that would describe you. And surprise, surprise, we find them in everyday life as lecturers, trainers, coaches, demonstrators, even as teachers. And again, the weakness is they can kind of become obsessed with irrelevant facts. They can over-intellectualise rather than apply. And if you're a teacher, there's real danger, and I'm one, surprise, surprise, there's real danger that you always read the Bible for other people. Oh, that makes great sense. Oh, there's 3 points there. It's real danger if you're a teacher there. But in an age of biblical illiteracy, we need teachers. And if you're a teacher, and again, let's not forget that part of the role of these also is about equipping others, about helping, about spotting other people in the church who are teachers that you can help develop, that they can play their place, play their role in this. If we get all five working together, then this is what Paul says. He says, as each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. Got some stuff for you to do in 2s and 3s in a moment, but anybody want to react to anything there? Yes, thank you.
As I'm sure you know, a lot of us would see pastor teacher as the same thing.
Yes.
I'm troubled, to be honest, I love all that you've said, but I'm troubled by the concept that we put forward, pastor. Couldn't we get that from the term pastoral care?
Yes.
Because actually, the word associated with it doesn't do with ruling, even in Revelation, ruling with a rod of iron.
Yeah.
So really, the pastor thing does involve building the sheep pen.
Yeah.
If you get my drift.
Yes.
It does involve whacking wolves.
Yeah.
It's a lot tougher and a lot less touchy-feely than we have read into the word. I just wanted to sort of...
I appreciate that. That so often, actually, it is that touchy-feely thing, rather than actually shepherd and king in the Old Testament are synonymous, aren't they?
They are.
And the Lord is my shepherd, the Lord is my ruler.
And he does all the green pasture stuff.
Exactly, that's right. But again, when I was at Hoddesdon, I was off work sick for 5 months. Very difficult period. And I saw for the first time, I'd never seen it before, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He makes me lie down, and he made me lie down. I could literally hardly get off the sofa. Nobody quite ever knew what it was, to be honest. It wasn't post-viral, because it was like a post-bacterial thing, but it was horrible. Yeah, thank you.
Would you like to comment on the fact that among those fivefold gifts, making disciples is one?
But I think that's the consequence. I think that's the consequence. And again, I think one of the things that frustrates me so often about that exploration at the end of Acts 2 about the nature of the church, there was something about the way they did it that the natural consequence was that the Lord added daily to the number of those who were being saved. You know, and again, I think this is, and it does talk, doesn't it? It makes the whole, it helps the other parts grow so the whole body's healthy and growing. And I would assume growing is also numerical and full of love. Yeah. It's not, sorry, just one other thing I do need to say. This is not, I don't believe this is a silver bullet. I don't believe if we get the fivefold, we'll be in revival. But it's one of the things. Yeah, thank you.
I'm just picking up on one thing you said when you said, I don't think you can ever have too many pastors in the church.
Right.
I think I disagree.
Right, okay, yes.
Mainly because I sit in the apostolic.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
But my experience would be that when you have so many pastors at work,
Yeah.
they can shut down the apostolic and the prophetic.
Yes.
Because they're so concerned with looking after the existing people and quite likely taking care of them, that to the extent where they want to get everyone right,
Yes.
everyone sorted, and then we can go out and do the missionary stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think I'd like to say two things about that. I think that's an immature expression of pastoring, and how you help them explore so that they actually step into what it really is. Because there's not a lot of confronting going on in that, is there, I suspect? No. There's a lot of, like, as you say, touchy-feely, let's all be nice. And the other thing I would say is that actually if you've got lots of pastors and you're apostolic, then if you get it right, they can set you free. Yeah? Because you can get on with your apostolic. And we're on a journey here. You're not going to achieve it tomorrow. But if you can get them doing the pastoring right, then it sets you free.
Well, I'm free anyway, because I'm not part of the normal church.
Right, okay, that's right.
Yes.
Yes.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
It's perhaps worth remembering that Jesus said, "Other sheep I have which are not of this fold."
Yes,
So the model of the shepherd is somebody who sees beyond
that's right,
sheep
yes.
he's already got.
Yeah. And so you also, I meant to pick up on, you said that really fascinating about the pastor teacher, because the way Paul writes is quite different there. And you do see in some people actually pastor and teacher put together. You don't in me. I'm a nice bloke and I can do pastoral things. And so when people are dying, I'm there, or was there. I'm released from that these days. But it didn't get me out of bed in the morning. But there are also brilliant teachers who are hopeless, but you wouldn't trust them with anybody. You wouldn't trust them with a dog. And there are also fantastic pastors who you'd never put in a pulpit. And so I see them as quite separate, but in some people you do get that combination. Yeah.
It's an observation that I have, which is, I think he's a brilliant teacher, and actually, I'm surprised I've not come across a
Yeah.
particular teacher. You know, I think I need to properly read that book. But the observation is the gentle brutality in which people can deal with people who aren't like them.
Yes.
And so one of my observations of church is there are certain, of course, a church can always pray more.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what I've found being, I suppose I'm more apostle, evangelist type, is, you know, you're going along, but just I think it was interesting how you used the word prayer at the beginning of, you know, hang on, can we just assume everything was grounded in prayer or whatever? And actually, it can be quite aggressive in a very gentle way.
Absolutely.
From the tactics
Yes.
of some of the other styles that try and bring down the apostle or try and bring down the evangelist. And actually, I think we have to be very, very aware of what we might be doing if we are, whatever we are, whether we're an apostle, how we interact with the other type.
Absolutely.
How we actually subtly, and we're very skilled, you know, we're all skilled at this, the common thing in church life.
Yes.
How you subtly drag others down because I thought we were about prayer.
Yeah.
I'm sort of thought a bit about this, or I thought about that.
That's right. Yes, I am with you entirely. And I think for me, this was liberating because I understood myself better and I began to understand where, dear Jessica, one of our worship leaders who was very prophetic, was always, well, we're not praying enough, which used to really irritate me. Why do we need to pray about it? We know what to do. You're asking me to pray about what God's commanded me to do. Well, actually, no, I need Jessica alongside me because she helps me understand where we need to go, who we need to work with.
But I think that this is something I've got, and I apologise for my cynicism. But if we just take a really horrible, cynical, practical view of what a church membership looks like, it is a group of people who choose to gather, choose to commit financially particularly, and the one thing they don't want is to pay for someone to confront them, and therefore is there a surprise that the teacher, who was the only one who didn't have the word confronting or challenging listed as one of their qualities or attributes, actually is it a surprise that teachers are one that we're all the churches seem to employ at the friendly sector, and we sort of, it's the mold break, because not only are we trying to say these people, like the apostles, like the evangelists, are going to break the mold, actually they've got to break the culture of the people who are defining the mold before you get there.
Absolutely.
That's tough.
It is tough. It is tough. And that's, unfortunately, I'm really sorry, but that's what you're living through. Because that's part of the challenge of the end of Christendom and whatever we're going into. But we are going into a missional age. Or we did. So we have to recover these things. But I agree with you. Paul McConaughey, who used to lead Philadelphia in Sheffield, he said the danger in Baptist, in many churches, is there is an unwritten rule. We pay you to look after us. And he said that, and it is. And that was the thing I identify with you. I always struggled with that. And that was why, I'm being really personal, that's why I hated when people said, this is our pastor. Because I kind of felt like it was an ownership thing. And I wanted to say, no. But that's my gripe, anyway.
That's where teaching comes in, isn't it?
Yes.
Teaching people, teaching where God is correcting and rebuking as well to encourage it.
Yeah.
So, I think maybe that's a lack of understanding within the body of Christ as pastors and leaders as to the operation function of the gifts.
Yes.
Operation of the fivefold within the body. We'll call the Baptist, body believers, priests and all believers, and it rests it upon the one guy at the top, or the few deacons and all the spiritual people in the church. And actually it's a body ministry, a priesthood of all believers, and I think we need to operate, function that model as a church, and we do in our Baptist communities.
So one of the things we did at Deerham, it wasn't identical to that. I did 3 Sundays on the Fivefold. And then we took what we did then was we said, if you're an apostle, we're going to have a meeting for you. If you're a prophet, we're going to gather you. And lots of people like, but we also say, if you don't know what you are, come along. And a guy who'd been as a missionary in Brazil said to me, this is fascinating. He said, this is so un-British to self-identify what you are. And even that, and it didn't crack everything, but it was kind of just trying to ground it in, if we believe this is what it says, let's try and do some stuff with it. Thank you.
I'm struggling a bit here.
Yes.
Because I think Fivefold points back the way how we interpret to a way of being church that doesn't work in our changing culture.
Right, yes.
And I'll reflect back on the reading of Scripture, say, when you look at it sociologically, when you look at Romans and the charismatic, the gifts that are given, it's early on in the early church. When you get to Ephesians, which some commentators would say was post-Paul, you're looking at a socialisation and where the church becomes institutionalised. And I wonder, and this is where I'm in my thinking for quite a long time now, is that the way how we have done church over the last 2 years doesn't work anymore. So we need to go back to more to Romans and looking at that, we are all given gifts, rather than to go towards like Ephesians, and if you go to the later letters in 1 and 2 Timothy, Peter, where you go to an institutional church, already forming as an institution, where we need to go back to becoming a movement, the word movement again here. And actually saying, you know, that model doesn't work for us now. And actually the way how we do church needs to be a bit bomb put underneath it and actually explode it and say, well, okay, see what the plan actually lands up, which is what Fresh Expressions is about and things like that. And as a Baptist movement, we're actually not very good at because of the way how we structure it. And I've just looked at, interview from MINRAC and the ministerial, the qualities that you have to have. And there's about 32 points that you have to meet to become accredited.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you know, we are pointing backwards all the time to a model of church, or big church. That doesn't work.
I agree with you entirely, but I wouldn't see the Fivefold as coming out of an institutional model of church. I would see the Fivefold working within a relational, organic model of church. And I think if you read, particularly Alan Hirsch, he might help you unpack that. Because I understand what you're saying about institute, but I see that model functioning in a relational plurality, different personalities. Actually, when you work together, those five really functioning together. And I think that's a relational thing, not an institutional thing. I think institutional church has interpreted this as about leadership, whereas I think whoever wrote it, I mean, I would go with Paul wrote it, but that doesn't matter. Whoever wrote it, I think was saying this is true of everybody in the church, not just the leaders. And I think that is a liberating, not an institutional thing. But I agree with you about, we've got to do something different.
I agree with you, because that is in a pioneering situation.
Yes.
For me, that is what I'm working in.
Yeah.
And I think it's much easier to work actually in a pioneering situation where you're in at ground level. Where I agree with you is, having tried to work that model out in inherited church, it's incredibly difficult. And it's that barrier, isn't it, that I'm trying to get across, because it's a mindset, and I think people are stuck in that.
And it's very difficult because they've got generations of assumptions. And this is the way we did it. And that is not going to be changed in 5 minutes. It's a generational shift. And those of us who are in more inherited models of churches, we just need to be patient. And we need to remember that we have a role to play in this generation that helps shape the future. We may not see the full fruit of that, but actually if we set our stall right under God, then we can play our part in helping the church in that journey. Frustrating as it is. I'm just going to, before we go to lunch, in twos, 5 minutes, in twos, who are you? And, which one gets you out of bed? Who do you have on your team? Who are you around your leadership team? Who you think, I understand that irritating so-and-so a bit better now, because they're one of those, which is different to me. Who do you have in the church? Because there will be key fivefold ministries in your church potentially, who are not part of your leadership team, but could have a really significant thing and role to play. Just 2 or 3 minutes in twos or threes, and then we'll have some lunch.
hate to break the conversation because it sounds as though it's really good, but consider it a pause rather than an end to the good stuff that was just going on. We're going to break for lunch in a minute, but I just can't resist kind of passing on a bit of information that seems really important too. I said earlier on that that this is the first in this kind of this new kind of brand, Rooted, but it's going to be the first of many. And I want to say a little bit about where we want to go with it. After extensive market research, well, I had a little conversation with myself and a few friends. I think I've really come to the conclusion that although we've launched this as as Rooted, and here we are as a group of ministers, that there's a wider market. That actually learning with leadership team and other leaders is also important. And yet, on the other hand, sometimes ministers value the opportunity of being together to address issues that are particular for them or in a different way. And so we're going to, in future, hopefully next year, we're going to run 2 streams, Rooted for Ministers and Rooted for Leaders. And by Rooted for Leaders, it's any kind of point leader or kind of a ministry leader in the church, or for leadership teams. Many of the subjects will be similar because they apply equally well. But when we're doing Rooted for Ministers, it will be pitched at an appropriate level. When it's rooted for leaders, it won't be dumb or dumbed right down, but it will be a little bit more accessible. So that's what's coming up next year. We haven't got dates in the diary or venues yet, but we'll be rolling that out in the coming year. When we do Rooted for Leaders and leadership teams, I'm not entirely sure whether it's better to do during midweek, which obviously could well mean people taking time off work, or whether to do it on a Saturday, which is equally unpopular for many people because of family time. So just from the gut, give me your opinion, please. If you think it'd be better in the weekday, put your tally point on the left-hand side over here, over lunch. If you think it'd be better on a Saturday, put it on the right. And we want to kind of to be very open to the subjects that we pursue as well. There's another flip chart just over there. Over lunch, if there are particular subjects that you think it will be helpful to explore, just doodle up there so it's intelligible, please. And if you see somebody else has put something there and you think that's absolutely where I'm at, give it a little tick next to it, and that will we'll do something with that. So really excited about rolling this out, and we want it to serve you, so please express your opinion. Something else that we're really excited about is we're going to launch next year learning communities. These are learning processes for teams, leadership teams, who are willing to engage in a 2-year transformational process. We've been reminded this morning from Chris how we're at this tipping point where the way in which we've been doing things ain't working, and we need to learn some new things. And actually transitioning from one to another is an immensely difficult thing. And actually you can't do it just by going to a conference. And having some structure around you that will enable you to go through a process as a leadership teams can be enormously helpful. Here's a little taste of what's coming. tell you later. Watch this space, but we'll be looking to recruit at least half a dozen church groups that will be willing to engage in this transformational process. I am super excited about it and think that it has the potential to really help some churches make the journey into the thing that we're all grasping for at the moment. And don't forget this as well. This is coming up, and it's in November. All the details are there. You've had all the stuff before, but this is going to be a little bit different from the norm as well. Ruth Rice, who is facilitating the day, is ace. She's an apostle. She is a pioneer, and she has pioneered a new ministry and has all sorts of really good things to say about how we engage with our communities and with culture. So get there if you possibly can. It will be really, really good. Somebody mentioned the Holy Habit things earlier on. I haven't actually looked at it, but if you have a skim through that and it takes your interest, David, could you put your hand up? David will go and see David over lunch, and he will tell you more about it because he knows all about it. And finally, before we break for lunch, Andy McManus is coming to say something, or saying it from there.
Different sort of strap lines that will give you tools to deal with Mrs. Higgins, who's quietly mumbling in church from the back row. So it's Saturday the 3rd, I'm on the first half. The second half is Ricky Kendall, who's got a degree in preaching. I didn't know he could get a degree in preaching from Spalding Baptist. So we never noticed. Please keep a lookout for that. It's free. Loads of parking. Thank you.
Just one more thing before we break for lunch. As it said in the information promoting today, there's no charge for today, but we want to give an opportunity, if you wish to make a voluntary contribution to kind of cover the expenses and so that we can roll this kind of stuff out. There's a little pot just over there. Do make a contribution there if you wish to, but only if you wish to. And don't forget the boards. Tom's going to say grace for us, and then we'll press unpause. You can carry on your conversations.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your immense provisions in our lives. And we thank you for the privilege of being able to gather today as your children and as leaders in your church. And so we pray over lunch that you would feed us and you would bless us. And Lord, we pray for those who have prepared this day. Would you bless them as well? And this food we're about to eat, would you bless it to us? In Jesus' name. Amen.
We'll come back about 1:25 so that we can start just a moment or two earlier.